we have to understand that we all have a source of power. Every single one of us, no matter where we are in life, no matter what hand we've been dealt, to live a life we love, even just a little bit more. And I know that's true. I know that to be true.
Welcome to the Well-Nourished Mother podcast. This is a show for women who desire a deeper, more mindful and meaningful pregnancy, birth, and motherhood experience. In this space, we bring so much reverence to the rite of passage that is the maiden to mother journey. I'm your host, Lauren Fortuna Flock, founder of Nest and Nourish. I'm an ex-nurse turned birth worker, holistic nutritionist, and somatic coaching student with a fiery passion for birth prep and motherhood prep that blends the head and the heart. Join me for inspiring conversations with experts, mothers, and all-around badass wise women, exploring all the ways we can nourish ourselves, body, mind, and heart, in pregnancy, birth, and motherhood. This space will help you cultivate the knowledge, practices, and resources you need to be the most embodied, vibrant, authentic, intuitive, and well-nourished mother you deserve to be. So welcome. Let's do this. Hello. Welcome back for episode 2. Today, I'm sharing a beautiful chat I had with my friend, Michelle Williams. Michelle is a traditional birthkeeper and educator at Isla Mama, a space devoted to inviting women into deeper reverence and trust in themselves. Michelle is in service to the continuum of life, moving in flow between birth, death, and all that is present in between. Transitioning from clinical nursing, she's now serving women in her community on Vancouver Island, attending births, providing family support, and offering womb and birth education. Michelle, the Isla Mama, is here because of her unwavering faith in women. To be honest, I had such a hard time naming this one because we chatted about so many different themes and topics, and there's just so many amazing little gems and takeaways. But what it's really all centered around is carving your own path, connecting to your true desire and purpose outside of the cultural and societal pressures and conditioning, and really redefining success. But like I said, there's also so many little gems about birth prep, identity, following your heart. And make sure you listen to the end because Michelle shares a beautiful little vocal practice. We'll call it that for now, that you can try for yourself. I'll keep it mysterious for now, but yeah, we'll call it a vocal practice. And heads up, right near the end of this episode, there's some super wonky audio. Something happened. I don't know what, and I don't know how to fix it. So this is me embracing the messiness of being a beginner. Being a beginner at something is really hard for me. I'm way more of a perfectionist than I ever thought, and it stems from these deep beliefs that I am not worthy, that I'm not good enough, that I'm going to be judged. And these are the things that I'm really working on in my own life right now. So this whole podcast project is me embodying all of the healing that I'm doing and trying to do. Instead of getting stuck in perfectionism and worrying about how it sounds and not releasing it and putting it off, I finally just accepted that it doesn't matter. The content of what is being said in those moments is so good and so beautiful that you're not even going to care about the crappy audio for a few minutes maybe. And if you do, this just might not be the podcast for you. Okay, so let's get into it. Hey, Michelle, welcome to the Well-Nourished Mother. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. I just want to start by saying I am just endlessly inspired by you. We actually live really close to each other and we've hung out a few times so far. And just your gentle, beautiful energy and way about you, it's like truly a gift to be in your presence. And I'm just, endlessly inspired by the work that you're doing in this world with women on the birth continuum. And so thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Oh, thank you so much, Lauren. This is a dream come true, honestly. The more that I am in this work and continue to work with other women and collaborate with other women and just build the community, I have to pinch myself all the time that this is the work that I get to do. Like this was on my calendar today, and I was just full of just reflection of where my life has taken me to get to this point where this is what I get to wake up and do. And it's such a gift. So thank you for creating the space.
Thank you. Yes. I feel the same way lately, where you just kind of look around and go, wow, like I got here. How did I get here? Like,
Yeah.
this is
How
what
did I get here?
yeah, how did I get here? So before I, go any further and get you to even introduce yourself, I am going to put you on the spot a little bit.
Okay.
I've been really loving asking this question. So can you think of one word or a couple words to describe your current phase or season of womanhood or of motherhood, whatever word kind of resonates most with you?
One word? Just a
One or
word?
a couple. Yeah. I know it's hard.
Mm. Mm. This is inspired actually by a community space that I am building right now. But the word I would describe my womanhood as in this moment in time is ripening.
That's
That's,
beautiful.
yeah. And the reason for that is I'm in this phase of my life right now where I'm very much in my maiden and very much in um, my young womanhood and feeling more and more called and pulled to the preparation of motherhood more every day. And it's this really interesting place to be in where you are ripening and you are becoming and you are, shedding layers and becoming more barren and more, vulnerable to see what's inside to prepare you for that. And that is the phase I'm in right now. And it's very intense and beautiful. And um, yeah, and a little tender too, even just to like speak out loud still of like what that means for my life and the trajectory of my life. And
Mm.
yeah, but that's where I'm at right now.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So while we have hung out a few times, and I know a little bit, about the work that you do, I really don't know that much about your background or about how you got into
Mm.
birth work. So can you just tell us a little bit about who you are and yeah, what brought you
Mm.
to this
Mm-hmm.
work?
Mm. This question every time stumps me because it changes every time I go to answer it. Um, But right now, my name is Michelle. I am a birth worker on Vancouver Island. I serve women in the continuum of birth. And what that means is from before they even have babies to their pregnancies, to attending their births, to their postpartums. And I also support loss and death. And that to me is the full continuum, is the full spectrum. It's my belief that we can't truly be serving women fully if we are not able to serve this full spectrum because birth is death and death is birth and they're so interconnected. And um, so my presence and my service has really shifted over the years. um, it is something I definitely was gifted with at a very young age in terms of knowing what my purpose was. I felt very clear as a young girl that I wanted to work with mothers and babies and families. Um, and I had no idea what that would look like, but I knew that very young. I remember even being, 3 years old and knowing that I wanted to nurture babies and be a mother and was really interested in that. And so that definitely has guided so much of my life from a very young age. And then you get into high school or, wherever they start asking you, okay, how are you going to make money in the world is basically what they're
Hmm.
asking you, right? And it shifts the way that you see that service. It becomes, in my opinion, a lot less pure and a lot less innocent
Mm.
because you're now looking at it through a lens of how will the system around me and the people around me view me as successful. And
Mm.
having such a clear purpose and a drive of knowing what I wanted to do with that voice was very challenging for me because as a young person, all I wanted to be was a nanny. I was super content there. I did that all through high school and I thought I could do this for the rest of my life. Like I love tending to mothers and their babies and learning about family. And, um, you know, somewhere in that was also this feeling of that's not enough, you know,
Mm-hmm.
that's not going to be enough for the people around me to say, you're successful, you're doing the right thing. Um, and so my mother, I love her. She's an angel on this earth, truly. She is a nurse, an RN, and she is retired now, but she was a nurse for 30 plus years, mostly in the operating room and um, kind of all over the place, but mostly the operating room was her place. And she saw a lot of babies born via cesarean. And so she would talk to me about that and how, she got to tend to the babies and tend to the mothers. And it started making me think, okay, that's where the moms are. That's where they're having babies. They're in the hospital. That's where I need to go.
Mm-hmm.
I had never at this point even heard of home birth. I had never at this point known anybody that had been born via home birth or had had a home birth. If it was spoken about, it was like, people in really underdeveloped countries or people who lived separate from the system, like Amish communities or Mennonite communities. It wasn't people like in my community that were birthing that way. At least that's what I perceived.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went into nursing school and I got into nursing school and began that journey. It was a 4-year undergrad program at a university in Ontario. It's a big, fancy school. And I went there with this again, the same purpose of this is going to get me to do what I want to do. This will be the thing that gets me to the thing that I actually want to be doing, which is helping mothers birth their babies and, care for them. And I very quickly realized that the type of service that was going to be asked of me was so far from what I had ever thought would be asked of me in terms of what my role was there. It was without, there's so many layers of this, and I know you have your own experience of this too, Lauren, being a nurse, but when you know in your heart how a human being deserves to be supported so fully and how you yourself would want to be supported, and then you become in this space where you see that is not possible because of the structure that is created. It became very upsetting for me very early on. Also want to premise I went to nursing school at 17 years old. So I'm 17. I have a late birthday, and so that's how old I was when I began. And, that age in itself is so confusing. And so you're so easily molded, and this idea is this is who you are now, and this is who you are now. And, so that was happening so often of how can I fit myself to be the perfect nurse, and then how can I fit myself to be this kind of nurse? And, oh, this is how I'm going to be accepted. So I'm going to be that. These are the things I have to say. So I'm going to be that. This is what's normal. So I'm going to do that. And it took me a while to realize how much that was eating me up inside. In my 3rd year of university, hit such a deep depression that I had to withdraw from school completely. I couldn't even stay there anymore. My mom, she wouldn't let me go back because she was so worried. And that was the first time I think in my whole life when I asked myself who I was living for.
Mm.
And the answer was not me. And I took that whole year off and really sat with who I am and how I want to serve, and totally forgot about mothers and babies for a while and just thought, okay, this isn't the path for me then. If I can't do it here, then I can't do it anywhere. Mm-hmm. And eventually in that time off, I thought, okay, what do I know makes me really happy? And it was going back to the moms and the babies. So I started working again as a nanny in postpartum in this time and witnessing mothers. And the mother that I supported in this time, she was so incredible. And she was suffering with some really, really intense postpartum depression and anxiety. And I had never even seen that up until this point. This is not the kind of practice that they give you in a hospital, because you only see them when they're in labor and in birth, and then they're gone. And this was a mother who her baby was 3 months old, and she was in such despair and so alone. And I went there thinking I would just be supporting this baby and get to hold this cute baby and walk around and, snuggle. And I realized that most of the work that was needed there was with this mother and just to listen to her. I had very little to offer at this point in terms of my knowledge, in terms of my experience, even with birth and with moms, because I'd mostly worked with families and just a little bit older babies. And I realized that none of that mattered at that moment. All she needed was someone to listen and be there, and share her birth story and share that she didn't understand why it was hard, and just kind of filter through all of these things she was feeling. And, every day that I left there, I felt such a sense of sadness for the amount of mothers that I know go through that completely alone. And even this woman, everybody in her life, I would hear her talking on the phone with her friends and with her family even, and putting on such a face and, posting the photos, and nobody have any idea what she's moving through. And after seeing that over the last, 7 years now, I know that there's many layers to why that is, but the root of it really is that women really need support in this time, no matter how easy or hard that experience might be. So I took that year off of school and I made the decision to return back to nursing school. And the reason was because I was finally going to begin working in labor and delivery. And I thought, okay, this is where it all comes together. This is when everything makes sense. And I'll finally feel that, like, why I'm here, the purpose of this. And so the way that my nursing school worked, the first 2 years were mostly theory. You did some practical in like retirement homes and things of that nature, but it was very minimal. And the last 2 years you're in the hospital quite a lot. So it's quite intensive the last 2 years. I'm sure yours was similar, Lauren.
Yeah, it was. Very.
Yeah. Yeah. So I get into the practicum, and I had arrived with very rose-colored glasses, I will admit, as we do, And it's still challenging to articulate exactly how I felt, because I do believe at the beginning I felt I was doing really good work. I do believe that. And I felt that I was being part of this amazing thing that was happening. And I was. I mean, babies were being born. That is an amazing thing. And as I reflect back more, I really see so many moments that I have now had to really grieve and forgive myself for for knowing that I wasn't actually serving people and potentially caused them some harm. And that is the biggest catalyst of the work that I do now, and why I do the work that I do now is from the remembrance of these moments. For example, just having a woman come in and feeling so defeated, and instead of just sitting with her and being present with her, like needing to fix it, needing to give her alternatives and needing to tell her these are the options, when now all I know is she needs someone to just see her and look at her and hold her. Right? Just these kinds of moments I have many of in my experience in the hospital setting.
And yeah, like it's because it's not set up for that, right? Not at all.
No.
Yeah, it's the institution of it. It's what's expected of you as a nurse. It's what you have to go document later. It's, policy and procedure and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll never forget one of my first weeks on the labor and delivery floor. There was this young girl that came in, and she must have been a year or two younger than I was at the time. I would have been around 21, around 20 at the time. She was there all by herself with her first baby and just seemed so scared. She barely spoke. And the nurse that I was shadowing at the time, she was just very rough and blunt with her and just checked her blood pressure and walked out of the room. And I said, well, what can I do for her? Like while you're, doing whatever you need to do, which was just chat with other people. What can I be doing for this woman who's in labor? And she just looked at me and just said, do nothing. Just leave her alone. She's just being silent and wants a natural birth anyways. And I thought, this cannot be right. Here I am sitting here doing nothing, and this woman is terrified. Like she was so terrified. So I walked into the room anyways, and I just sat beside her and held her hand, and she just looked at me and started to sob, and just said she was in so much pain. So I just said, why don't we go for a walk? And we walked up and down the hallway for like 3.5 hours, and she's just gripping my hand the whole time. And I just remember getting glares from the nurse that was supposed to be her nurse as well. And in that moment, I just felt such a disconnect, and I felt myself just like falling away from the system that I thought that I was a part of, and realizing I did not belong, and I didn't want to belong. That was one of many moments. I got in trouble a lot. Not in trouble, but just I did get spoken to a lot in terms of how I was wasting time, and I needed to be faster, and I needed to have my priorities, more straight, when the reality of it was I never took a lunch. I never took a break because I was sitting with these women and talking with their husbands and allowing them to feel really seen and safe, and giving their baby an extra long newborn bath so that they could help me, and just all of these things that are so obvious of how you would show up were very negatively received. Yeah.
I had very similar experience in nursing school as well. Like multiple times where, I was sitting in a room holding the hand of, this sweet little old lady with dementia who was having hallucinations, seeing stuff crawling on the ceiling and freaking out. And all I did was sat down beside her and gave her my hand. And, I was reprimanded for that. Like, where were you? Why weren't you doing, these 3 other tasks? It's like, well, I was doing important work here.
But this is the work. This is why we're here.
Yes, this is the work. But it's fascinating because like you think that that's what being a nurse is going to be about. And then, like you've said, you quickly learn that because of the larger culture of it, the institution of it, the policy, the procedure, all of those things, that it's really not about that. And we're not here to like bash nursing at all.
No.
I have loved being a nurse, and there's so much that we can talk about with that. You know, nursing really is an identity that people take on as their own. And it does have this like cultural perception of, oh, that person's successful, that person's caring, that person's, you know, I can respect them. At least that's how I felt it was perceived. Yeah. So letting go of that too is really difficult. And to share that I have been a nurse for 10 years, and I just this morning actually finally, you know, click the button to cancel my registration. So I am no longer a nurse, and I am fully doing whatever I'm doing here, but have fully let go of that.
Lauren, that's huge.
Yeah. It's a big step, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it doesn't come, like, I think people also, when they see that and they see, you know, a person who has moved away from the system, it's the layers that go into that, as you mentioned, are so extreme. And I will use the word extreme because it does take, you do have to find a completely new identity of yourself, like down to, you know, just the things people give you as gifts, like the amount of like nursing mugs I have and the amount of like times that my mom, I just know, would like tell somebody that I'm a nurse while I'm beside her, and like her eyes are just beaming, and the person receives that so well. And I just, the amount of times you see that, it's like there's a piece inside of us, I think, as like primal beings, where it's like, I am throwing myself to the wolves by letting this go. Like it truly feels that way in moments. So yeah, I just wanted to really celebrate you in this moment for the amount of work and courage and just truly honing into your heart that I know that must have taken for you to get to that point. Yeah, it's yeah. You know, you've done it. So
yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. I feel seen in that. Yeah, because it really has been a really wild ride. And, you know, I don't know if I'll get into that, my whole reasons why right now, but partially my decision, partially not, partially the perfect like shove into it that I needed, where, you know, I've had these pulls and tugs, and, you know, even back in nursing school itself, you know, that little moment holding that little old lady's hand, like even then I knew that maybe this really isn't the right path for me. But for me personally, I think like good girl conditioning really played such a big role in my own decision to become a nurse. And like, I'm fascinated that for you, it was such a young, like you were so young when you knew what you really wanted to do. And then I like how you said that, it starts to it loses its purity, its innocence when you start thinking, well, how are you going to make money? You know, what's safe and secure?
Yeah.
How are you going to survive? And for me, you know, I am the daughter of immigrants. I'm first generation Italian. So my father was born in Italy. I'm the first in our family to go to university. Like that alone was a huge accomplishment. So for me, it was all about like, how can I do better than my parents? How can I get a job that's really secure, have benefits, have a pension? Like those were the things that mattered in my mind. Nothing else really mattered, you know? And luckily I did kind of fall into something that I did enjoy and love. And I was able to use the gifts and skills that I do have. And even that makes me think of, you know, this label and identity of nurse, and letting go of it. You know, I've been thinking a lot about how, you know, I'm not letting go of all those things that I was or am. Like the title nurse doesn't give me those things. I already had those things. I was already patient and compassionate and full of empathy and wanting to help people heal. Like that was already there. And nursing just gave it a container. And, you know, it probably wasn't the right container, but it was a container, you know?
Oh, I love that so much. Yeah. And I think people can take that into so many other layers of life of there's things that are just innate within us that nobody can take away ever,
Mm.
no matter what happens, and it's that knowing and holding on to those things that are just you because they are, not because someone gave you a piece of paper and said that you are, and
Mm.
not because you completed a task list, and not because your mom says you are, or your dad says you are, or the system says you are, just
Hmm.
because that you are.
Hmm. Yeah. And like this definition of success, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like what that means. And I think for so long, for me, it meant, yeah, having a high hourly wage, having benefits, having a pension, and nothing else really mattered. Didn't matter how happy I was each day
Mm-hmm.
going to work, didn't matter the actual,
Mm-hmm.
healing I was doing or helping that I was doing. Like none of that mattered. And
Mm-hmm.
now, I don't know, for me, becoming a mother has been the catalyst. To really like strip back all of those layers, all of those roles, all of those identities to figure out like what it is that I really am and really want to do. And you
Mm-hmm.
kind of mentioned, like who am I? And just this morning I was doing
Yeah.
this practice of answering that question, like journaling and trying to answer that question, like who am I? And it's so interesting to see that at first all that wants to come out are the labels, are the roles. And then it's like, okay, now under that, who am I? Under that, who am I? Like
Mm.
it's a
Mm.
hard question. It's a hard question. Yeah. And it's this
Mm-hmm.
beautiful opportunity to really like, yeah, just figure out what is the most true for you. And I am fully aware that I have privilege. I have the privilege to let go of the super safe, secure job, and follow, my passion and something else. So I'm fully aware of that and grateful for that.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I know not everyone kind of feels that they have those options, but it can even be in like subtle ways, figuring out
Mm-hmm.
who you truly are and following those breadcrumbs.
For sure. Yeah, I do. I I will push back a little bit on that in the sense that I do believe that we all have choice, no matter
Mm-hmm.
our situation in life. I think I often get reflected that my path has been easeful, and it has not at all. Um, and it's not to say that that is the premise of why we do what we do, to say that it was so hard and here we are. But it also is this reminder to my old versions of myself and the versions of myself that are still there, that think that I am stuck in my circumstance of life. And this this whole process and this continuation of this process is what reminds me that I get to continue to do that, throughout the rest of my life. Like I very easily find myself having to fight that belief system that I have to remain stagnant in order to feel safe, or I have to remain with what I know and what's comfortable because I have responsibilities and I have, a partner and I have a house and I have a dog. And this means that I can't take risks. This means that I can't, step outside of the box. And it takes a lot for me still even to really push back on that and realize that the more that we really follow that feeling of where we know we will be the most of service to the world, it will always benefit us and the people around us in so many more ways than we can see. And that doesn't mean that it's not going to be really uncomfortable, and there'll be a lot of sacrifice needed to be made in that
Mm-hmm.
process. But yeah, the reason I push back on that too is there is a lot of conversation, and I completely agree with this, perception that we're all in different playing fields and we all have different privilege. But at the end of the day, in to really be able to be of service to people and to really allow us all to break out of that matrix of limitation. We have to understand that we all have a source of power, every single one of us, no matter where we are in life, no matter what hand we've been dealt, to live a life we love, even just a little bit more. And I know that's true. I know that to be true.
Yeah, that's so true. I totally agree. Yes, we do have choice. And it's this like, it's learning, or it's just becoming more aware of the conditioning and of the stories that we're telling ourselves. And it's like stripping it back and learning to like observe these things rather than identify with them. So like being able to separate, that little bit. And yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, you hear this a lot in mothering in particular, right? This idea that you, as a mother, as a woman, have only one way of doing things, and it does take a lot of courage to step outside of that norm and do things differently and raise your babies differently. And yeah, it's there though, if you look for it, right? It's even in the most subtle ways, like just even what you give them to eat, like where they play. Like there's all these little moments where you can make those choices, even if it's hard or uncomfortable.
Yeah. And for me, becoming a mother, like the things that I used to worry about, like what other people thought. And maybe that's just being like in my 30s as well. There's just this like, I just don't give a shit anymore. Like none of that matters to me. What matters to me is my own perception of myself. Like how do I feel about the choices I'm making? And the health of my own family and my own child, like nothing else. And I wish I could like pinpoint what it is that changes, but I can't even put words to it. It's just yeah.
Maybe it's just life too. Like I feel like we are given what we need in different phases of our life. Like I think you need to be in the confusion and the like the terror of who am I and what am I doing and why am I here, in order to be able to feel that peace and that landing, right? It's all needed. You need to go through that as well.
Yeah, I agree. So, just to kind of get back to your story a little bit, like obviously even back in school, you kind of already had those little tugs that maybe this wasn't right for you. What did it look like when you started to like separate yourself from the system and kind of create your own path, your own way?
For me, it happened quite quickly. Like I graduated from school and I worked for 6 months as a nurse, and that was really it for me. I you have to write your exam, your board exam, and I failed it the first time I wrote it. And it was devastating for me. And I thought, how is this possible? Like I, did well in school, I studied well, like this doesn't make any sense. And it really rattled me and made me really upset. And I didn't understand why. And that was the first time I really questioned, like, do I even want to write this again? Why am I writing this exam? What am I doing this for? And I couldn't find an answer. I couldn't find an answer because I knew that I didn't want to work in a hospital at this point. I knew that 100%. I knew that it was not good for my health. I knew that my anxiety just couldn't handle it. The lights, just all of it, it just was not supportive to my system as a human being. And I knew enough to know that it would be detrimental to me to work there longer than I already had. So knowing that, I definitely went through all of the pieces of, well, I should just have it because that will give me my foot in the door and I can do other things with it and I can still get benefits or I can work part-time. And I went through all of these paths and all of these layers. But at the end of the day, when I asked myself what I wanted to do and how I wanted to serve, there was nowhere where having that registration made a difference in terms of the way that I would support people. And I knew that it wasn't contingent on how I would support people. So I never wrote it again. And
Amazing.
within 6 months of not writing it, they take away the registration that they've just given you and they give you 5 years to write it again. And then it's gone basically forever. I think that there's a loophole in that. I've been told that if you really want it back, you can appease it and it's not that challenging because they know that you've just paid all this money and done the schooling. But essentially after 5 years, it's no longer applicable. So my 5 years have passed. And it was not just like an easy process. It was many times throughout the year of beginning to prepare to write it again and just get all my ducks in a row and be like, okay, I'm just going to do it. And then every time I would begin that process, there's everything in me was like, this is a waste of your time. Like, this is not how you're meant to be showing up. There's so much better use of this energy. Even just the stuff that you have to study for it. It's just, I mean, as you know, it's so intense and so much of just medications and things that are so not actually going to support you and helping people in any way. They basically teach you how to be like a robot and how to like follow these 3 steps of how to like allow someone to sit down in a chair. It's ridiculous, the things that you have to study. And yeah, in that time, I moved out west to take a holistic doula program out here on the island. And that's why I'm here. That's what led me to Vancouver Island, is this program. Again, because even through all the education, I never once learned how to support a woman in a physiological home birth or physiological birth of any sort, of that matter. When I say physiologic birth, I mean a birth that has no intervention, a birth that has no interruption. And it's the reason we're not taught that in a hospital is because it's not possible to be done in a hospital. But also it blew my mind that was never even spoken to us about. So I had no idea how to support a woman in a home birth, even with my years of nursing school and supporting women with birth in the hospital for over 2 years, which says a lot in my opinion. So yeah, I came to the island and I took this program. It was a 4-month full-time program and I learned a lot, and still, even within that, felt it was so limiting in terms of the freedom that I knew was available to women. For example, it was still very much a woman needs you in order to birth. That was the main kind of logic, the main mantra, which was the same one that I had just tried to take myself out of, right? Of women can't birth without the system. Women can't birth without nurses, without doctors. They're in debt to them. They are at their mercy. And it was the same narrative, even within this doula program, which is very holistic and natural and, for women and celebrating women. It was still with this undertone of women aren't able to do this. So that's why you're here.
They need to be saved.
Yes, they need to be saved. Exactly. And you are the one that will save them. Right?
Yeah.
Which is also just extremely, it's a very, like, nobody should have that weight on their shoulders to save women. Like, that's an impossible standard to meet and expect anybody to meet, And so in this time, I began my own business. which they kind of support you with in the doula program, which is interesting because teach you they teach you what to say and how to set it up and how to get clients and how to, you know, charge what you need to and all of these very businessy things, which again just totally sidetracked me from the mission that I was actually on again. Uh, and yeah, it led me to really needing to step back again from all of it and again just go back into my community. And that's what's continued to support me is just, okay, forget about the website, forget about this title, forget about what I am now and what I'm supposed to tell people I do, and just who in the community needs support. And so that's what I did. I wrote a little ad, I suppose, on a Facebook page in my community, and I stuck up a little pamphlet, and I had 3 families contact me with new babies and was just supporting them in their homes again. And I just felt like, why did I go through all of this again just to be back here, where I've always known that I wanted to be.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's kind of been my journey back into the community and where I am now. And where I am right now in terms of my work is I still support mostly in postpartum and mostly new moms. And the women that I support in their births and attend their births are often women that I am super connected to and have a really deep bond with. And so I don't do, 10 births a month. I don't do a lot of running around and, this shift into that shift. It's very slow and organic. And I love that. And I want it that way, which again is such a narrative that I had to break down because in doula school, it was like, you should have like at least 5 births a month and it's going to be intense and it's going to be really hard. And you're going to have to get up in the middle of the night and then have no night's sleep and then go to another birth. And it just was like so chaotic and stressful. And I think that can be wonderful for some people if that's what you desire. And that feels like you have the capacity for, but I certainly do not. And so yeah, my birth work is a lot more intimate, the most intimate it's ever been in my whole life, in the sense that I know these women so well. I love these women so much. I know their families. I know their partners. I know the foods they love to eat. I know the things that they're scared of. I know their fears. I know their joys. I know what they're looking forward to as a mother. I know what their relationships are like with their own mothers. And I get to really be able to celebrate them in their motherhood because I get to see them in their fullness as well. So when I look them in the eyes and I say, you're doing amazing, you're an amazing mother, they receive that. And I can feel them receiving that because I'm not just a random person coming in and telling them that, and that in itself is the center of why I do the work that I do, is to build that relationship in that way so that in those moments when they really do need support and they really are in a place where they're feeling like depleted or alone, that we have built something where I can truly be there as a presence for them to make them feel like they're not,
That's beautiful.
So yeah, that's I hope to be doing this until I die. This work. Truly. It's yeah, that's kind of the trajectory of how I got to where I am now.
That's beautiful. I wish every woman could. And again, not that every woman needs to be saved at all. I just wish that every woman could feel that kind of support and have that kind of support in their life. Yeah.
Yeah. I will say there's a difference too between having somebody support you and be the thing that's allowing you to feel like you can versus someone who who is supporting your innate ability to already do the thing, right? It's a different experience. It's the same thing as in nursing, of supporting somebody to get up from a chair. You can either pull them up fully and let them put all their weight on you, or you can let them put a gentle hand on your arm and just guide them up. It's they will feel so much better about themselves and stronger and more capable if they do the second, where they do most of the work and you're just there. So yeah.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And I know you, and I know the work that you do. So I know that you just innately trust women and our ability to do this. But I think for a lot of women, they don't trust themselves. So how do we get from point A to point B there? Even I think of myself preparing for my own birth, almost 2 years ago now. I had the mentality of, yes, I can do this. And I had all the affirmations, and I, planned for the undisturbed physiological birth, and didn't end up that way. And I had a very overwhelmingly positive experience because I was autonomous and I knew how to stand up for myself and all of those things. And I do feel like I made all of the decisions that led to all of the, interventions that I did end up with. But there is this piece of that I question, what was it that I couldn't handle that intensity? Why? Why couldn't I handle that intensity? And I think a lot about how, in my birth prep, I wish it was less focused on just trying to change my mind and more about getting into my body. And, how do I usually respond to intense feelings? Well, at least previously, I would distract, I would scroll, I would drink wine, I would, all these things to get away from it, to run away from it. And I feel like this is the type of birth prep that we should be doing, is getting into those deeper layers of, what do you do when you're faced with intensity? Because birth is intense and it is painful. And I think the whole pain-free birth thing is a load of crap and does a disservice to women, because when you end up with back labor, like myself, with no breaks, that affirmation, I can do anything for a minute. Well, it was 50 hours straight. So, and it was painful. So,
yes, yes, I so see you in that. And I myself have never given birth, but I have also seen this experience enough to change the vocabulary that I use so completely. Where, the reality of the world that we live in, we can not want any intervention and want a completely natural birth. And there also, the reality of how we live and where we live is we have so many layers to us of where that might actually be needed and necessary because of our life experience, because of the body structure that we have, because of the nutrition of our mothers, because of the location that we're in, because of so many aspects, the trust that you have in your body, any traumas that you have stored in your body. And yes, we can know a lot of these things and we can do the work and begin to unravel and be like, okay, yes, I have trauma, so this might be more challenging. And I prepared for that. And as with life and as with all things, you can go into labor and go into birth and have a completely new experience of something that you didn't even know was there and was not even possible to know was there until you're in that moment. And I say this because there's this subtle judgment that has permeated the birth realm for this idea that if you don't have this perfect natural physiological birth, then you haven't done enough work. And I think it's complete bullshit. And it does not serve women to speak that way. Again, my experience in the hospital setting too, people ask me all the time, wouldn't birth be better with no intervention at all? If they didn't exist at all? And I said, sure, in a dream world where none of us have any trauma and none of us have any life experience that keeps us from knowing and trusting our bodies and have never been imprinted with all of these belief systems that take lifetimes and generations to undo, sure, yes,
Mm-hmm.
that would be ideal. But the where you can't just take all these interventions away and say you're not supposed to be using these when the opposite is true. We've
Mm-hmm.
all been literally raised by mothers and grandmothers who also didn't know how to trust their bodies,
Mm-hmm.
most of them, and also didn't really know what was available to them, and also are scared, and also feel judged, and also feel insecure, and all of these things. And so the deepest work, as you mentioned, that a woman can do to prepare herself for birth is to really ask her, how do you deal with the unknown parts of yourself? Right? How do
Mm-hmm.
you deal, or how would you respond to a piece of yourself that you might not even know is there? How can you show up for that? Even if it's dark, even if it's scary, even if it's painful, even if it's uncomfortable. Like, how has that process been for you in your life? And also, are you able to let down the sword sometimes and realize what your capacity is,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, a woman in labor, she's like you just said, you've just been in it for 50 hours, that is not necessarily the time where you're going to be able to sit and meditate and go
Mm-hmm.
deep with why that's happening. You just have to show up for yourself and care for yourself like you would a child in that moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of you're not gonna if a child comes to you with a scraped knee, the first thing you ask isn't how did this happen? What did you do? Like tell me every
Mm-hmm.
detail. It's like the first thing you're gonna do is scoop them up and comfort them and give them what they actually need.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, we can, yes, do the work, and yes, be self-critical and be self-aware, but also like be so compassionate with yourself and know that it's a really challenging time that we live in, especially as women, especially as birthing women. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah, there like any conversation in this birth realm, there's just so much nuance and so many layers, like you've said. It's hard to have a
mhm.
conversation without there being, yeah, just like multiple little tangents that we can go down. And yeah, I
Yes.
I feel like we could talk for days. So to be mindful of time, yeah. I'm wondering if you can share. So I mentioned before we started recording that you posted something recently that I in love with. It
Mm,
was a very beautiful post. Can you tell us a little bit about that, where it comes from, and maybe
mm.
share something with us if you feel so called?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the beginning of where this came from, um, actually the first time I ever heard this song, it was at a friend of mine. It was at her bachelorette, and this one of her best friends was leading us through a beautiful yoga practice and a breath practice. And it was this group of women, and she sang this to us all. And I really didn't think about it much after that, other than, wow, that was so beautiful. And without going again, I could talk for hours, but my relationship to faith has been very amplified and very deepened in the last year of my life. And that has looked like many things, but part of that has actually been reading the Bible and reading scripture and just beginning to open myself up to other ways we can connect to God and to the Creator. And um, as I was um, on this quest and, you know, really finding different pieces that are connected to scripture, I found this beautiful book of hymns, and I opened up a page in the hymn book, and this song was in the hymn book. And so I think this song now has been changed slightly to be more in the yoga kind of realm and with and in kind of meditation and mantra, but it actually originated in scripture and as a song to God. And so I thought that was so beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And I can just imagine, generations and generations of women singing this to one another and, in their beautiful churches where people used to all pray and these beautiful temples or churches or wherever they may be and singing this song to each other. And so whenever I sing this now, that's really what I'm thinking of. I'm thinking about God. I'm thinking about woman. The last time I sang this for anybody was at a mother's blessing about a month ago. And yeah, it was such a beautiful thing to share. And I encourage anyone listening to this to sing this with yourself. It's a beautiful way as well for anybody who doesn't know how to connect to their womb or just to be in that space with their bodies. It's a really beautiful place to start because sometimes we don't know what to say, we don't know what to do, we don't know how to be, we don't know, how to even begin cultivating that kind of practice with ourselves. And the gift of song and using our voice to connect to the womb is so powerful. The throat and the vagina are so connected in terms of their openness. And that's just the way that the body works, the physiology of the body. When the throat is opened and the throat is able to be expressed, same goes for the womb. So, I'm going to sing it now. I'm just going to take a few breaths. Please prepare me to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true, with thanksgiving. I'll be a living sanctuary for you.
Well, that's it for episode number 2. Wow, what a beautiful conversation with Michelle. Like I said in the beginning, Michelle just has this beautiful, gentle energy about her that is just so potent, and it's like a warm hug, really. And her beautiful singing literally lulled me into this trance-like state at the end, and I super awkwardly stopped recording before asking her to tell us where to find her. So if you want to connect with Michelle, check the links in the show notes, but you can find her at islamama.com and on Instagram at Isla, ISLA__mama, MAMA. And how mysterious is it that audio turned into this weird, heavenly echoey sound right when she was singing? I don't know. It seemed almost perfect in a way. Anyways, hop on over to Instagram and let me know what you thought of this episode. Did anything come up for you? Was there any, major takeaway for you? Send me a DM, share a comment, anything. I want to hear about it. So find me at nestandnourish_. And as always, if you enjoyed this conversation and the themes and topics we're touching on, please, please, please rate and review the podcast wherever you're listening from. It really just helps it grow and blossom, and I am ever so grateful. So that's all for now. See you next time.